Welcome. It's a wonderful day in the GTA. It's your host, Giselle Wilson with Black Wellness, and it's another Black Wellness Saturday here in the city. So we'd like to thank you for tuning in. And this show is co-produced by Lori Beezer. So we give her a shout out. She's not in the studio today, but definitely know that she and others are watching. So we want to remind you to like, follow, and share. We're located on Facebook at Support Black Wellness Now. So if you want to tune into any of our episodes, you can just look us up on Facebook at Support Black Wellness Now. You can also email us at blackwellnessworldwide@gmail.com. That's blackwellnessworldwide@gmail.com. So we've been doing so many shows. This is our 8th one, so we're very proud of that, and we thank you so much for your support. Last month we were talking about women and their mental health. This month, we're talking about men and their mental health and the issues that affect them. And I know this show is highly anticipated, even by myself, only because there's so much I want to know about our next topic. We're going to be talking about the cannabis industry. And this is very huge in Canada, obviously because we're the second country to be legalized in the world. So we're kind of the pioneers, and we're setting the trend in the legislation, the policy, and the international industry. So we definitely want to talk about this from a cultural perspective and how it's affecting the society on a whole, as well as the Black community, and how we see this, our history with it, and just the business side of it as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guests to my right and to my left. So starting in that order, I want to introduce to you Omari Sankofa of the Organja Society. And they do a lot in the community for a very, very long time in terms of advocacy, in terms of industry, and even policy. So he will tell you a little bit more about what he does. And then to my right, I have Isaiah Telford, who has his own company called Grab Now. And he deals with the technology side, the delivery systems when it comes to cannabis. So without further ado, let's just start because I'm excited. And I don't want to do too much talking, but I want to thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Definitely.
This will be a learning lesson for me as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, we want to hear from the community, from experts in the industry, as well as our Black men. So we really want to showcase them in a positive, progressive light.
That's love.
That's it. Doing industry, being in their mental wellness, and just showcasing what they know.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
So let's begin. I guess the top question for me is terminology. From my understanding, there's so many terms and so many names that we refer to this most versatile plant, as we know as cannabis, as marijuana, weed, ganja. What should we be calling this? What term should we use?
We call it Ganja. The organization is Organja, and it was specifically named for that reason because culturally, a lot of people don't, have different references to the plant.
Right.
And really and truly, even with those different references, there's a history and a lineage when it comes to Ganja, how it was, propagated, how it was, cultivated, how it was distributed, how it was used, the whole perspective towards it. So we like to say Ganja, as early as in the Torah, you can look and see it named cannabism, and from there spread throughout the Mediterranean, and they in turn called it cannabis from that root word cannabism. But when we talk about it in a cultural perspective, this plant is documented back to 5th century BC.
Okay.
So, and they found way earlier, like we're talking about thousands of years before, evidence of hashish in the pyramids. So this is a plant that's been with us for, from probably the dawn of time.
That's right. And what do you think, Isaiah?
So I think with the Black community, we, call it cannabis, marijuana, but it's so dynamic. It's such a dynamic plant that we just don't understand exactly what all parts of the plants do and their different dynamics. And, so when we talk about cannabis, in a layman's terms, cannabis is basically the whole plant.
Okay.
There's 3 different variations of this plant. Mm-hmm. The 2 most known are sativa and indica. And then those two have different feelings in terms of the flowers and the bud.
Okay.
But, when we talk about, cannabis, let's not forget that hemp does come from the cannabis plant. So hemp, what the definition is stated throughout the different countries, is basically the part of the cannabis plant that is actually has under 0.2% of THC within it. In or in America, it's 0.3. Basically, marijuana is then classified as anything over 0.3 or 0.2 percent of THC. So when we talk about what is cannabis versus what is marijuana, versus what is hemp and where everything comes from. It's just good to know that, cannabis is the whole plant. It is not only the little flower, colas, or the nugs. This plant has, THC, it has CBD, and they both do different things, and they both are in different parts of the plant. So it's good to know the different terminologies in terms of, what all the plant can do.
Right.
We have hemp seed oil and CBD. Those are two completely different things. CBD is something that is new that also has basically emerged. It's not new, but it's new basically because of the industry.
Right.
It is being marketed heavily as a pain management. That is not psychoactive, even though marijuana is psychoactive, but they both do come or derive from the same plant.
Wow.
However, CBD is made different than hemp seed oil. Hemp seed oil is more of a carrier oil, is used more for skin. It does not have any pain management
Effects.
qualities or effects in it, but it's also an oil that derives from the plant. So when we talk about cannabis, it's good to come with an open mind. We are not only talking about weed, blunts, spliffs.
Right.
We are talking about a plant that basically has over 50,000 uses for it.
That's
from
right.
textiles to clothing, to oils to beauty products, all of that have been proven to be
Very effective.
Very effective.
Well, we're going to dive into all of that, but I just want to stick a little bit right now more on the cultural significance end of things, especially when it comes to indigenous populations in the world, the African diaspora. What is the significance to culture and spirituality? What is the history of use and the significance to our people?
Well, to build off of what Isaiah was speaking about, the classifications have been very important in terms of the way they're using it in industry today.
Right.
But because of the perspective and the way in which we use plants on a whole, plants that are considered traditional medicine, a sacrament, our approach it has always been different. And likewise, the different expressions and variations of the different type of species of cannabis has everything to do with where it was grown.
Okay.
So what I'm getting to and leading to is, as we say, Ganja. Ganja has everything to do with people and plant. And in that perspective, when we talk about Africa, the diaspora, Asia, India, all of these places, South America, that have had Ganja for so many centuries,
right.
We're talking about an experience. So, for example, where hemp has been basically, it's been more of a focus in terms of where it's been found and that sort of thing, has everything to do with where it was grown. So you'll see that in harsher conditions, because of the way it's grown, it is more fibrous.
Interesting.
Now, in other conditions where there may be more humidity, different types of soil, and different types of nutrients and minerals, then you'll find different expressions. But it's all really coming from the same plant. And it's a great plant because in Africa, we had uses going far back, as I said, centuries, millennium going back, where we used it for traditional medicine and for sacrament. So many of the shamans in our culture, whether they were in South Africa, where it's called Dhaka, or different regions in West Africa and Nigeria, where they have the magical black weed or spirit weed of Ganja. Enough people, haven't even tried before, but these plants express differently. So, for example, when they're looking for THCV, which is right now the type of strain or type of expression that they're searching all over for. And in fact, a group called Strain Hunters from Europe was in Congo over the past several years trying to find that magical strain, just like lamb's bread in Jamaica, because of the expressions and the different uses that they're realizing for these plants. Some are great for epilepsy. Some are great for, some people might not understand this, but even time travel.
Wow.
Yeah, man, this is a very powerful plant, and we have yet to even understand how far-reaching the realm of this plant really is. It's not confined to our perception or our realm.
Mm-hmm. And it's so funny that you say that, because it seems like the ancient civilizations had more wisdom on
That's
this
correct.
plant, and it's almost like we're rediscovering
That's correct.
The secrets and even the process of growing. You were alluding to the process of growing, which seems to be a very delicate process. I know that the industry, in terms of mass production, is experiencing challenges when it comes to scaling it at different degrees.
I'd love to
Please,
speak to that.
I would love both of you, so please continue.
So, if I may,
Please, go right
before we
ahead.
jump to the industry part,
Yes.
I'd like to just bring people up to
Yeah,
speed. So
definitely.
we went for a long time in this earth where different cultures, and I mentioned many of them, many of the nations already, from people talk about Thai sticks, or they talk about Acapulco gold, or they talk about Colombian Cali or Colombian gold. Wow. Talk about Jamaican lamb's bread. You're talking about Nepalese, the Nepalese hash. You're talking about Kashmir. You're speaking of so many places in the world. So for even things to get to where they are now, it's very important that ones understand that this took not only the spreading of seeds. For example, the East Indian population, and many of the Hindi people who ended up in the Caribbean in the mid to late 1800s, roughly around 1865 in Jamaica, I can say for sure, they brought with them their seeds. And it's not saying that there weren't seeds there before in Jamaica, but that is when you started to see a wider use of Ganja at that time in Jamaica. Because people brought with them the seeds from wherever they came. So the type of herb that's found there may not even be found in India again that way. So because it took on its own expression over a period of time. So getting to where industry, this great realm of ganja that we're talking about now is it's such a vast realm, because in it are stories, our culture, our medicine, our spirituality, and for things to get to where they were now, where you have wedding cake or pink kush or Bruce Banner and all of these different strains that people are talking about.
I love the names.
There's a whole lineage in all this etymology that we're talking about.
Right.
If you take certain plants like the black domina or white rhino, many of them, if you go back to their earlier strains, are crossed with Brazilian strains. Okay, so the white family has a lineage. All the white plants, the white widow, white rhino, they have a lineage with Brazilian strains. But what breeders did over time, you have to understand, because this has been illegal and prohibited in so many countries, even the smuggling of seeds was a big thing to get it to where it is now. So Europeans had long started to travel to different places and notice that this magical plant was popping up everywhere. And what they did, you had early breeders, and not to give them more credit than the herbsman and herbswoman of all these great cultures, but I'm giving you some names so that people can do their own research and start to understand this lineage.
Right.
So you have breeders like Shanti Baba and smugglers. These people are lauded and heralded as heroes and icons in popular culture, by the way. Mr. Nice, go look him up, Howard Marks. These were all people. And then you have a great man like, I respect him very much, Lawrence Cherniak. He did some travels back in the 70s, and you can look at his books like the great books of hashish or the great books of cannabis. And those books are at a time when, not much different from people who go backpacking in Europe now. They would go backpacking and travel throughout these countries in India, in the Middle East, at a time when you could. Right now, we can't just so easily go to these countries and travel for obvious reasons, for political reasons, and most of these countries are in turmoil with war. But they would go there, they would learn about hashish, sit with the like the sadhu people in India, and sit with the Nepalese people who, by the way, for example, climbing those great mountains where, a lot of people who are traveling and whatnot go disappearing up in those mountains through avalanches. What they would use to protect themselves was the ganja oil. Okay. From rubbing the hashish, you get basically a film, a resin, but it's an oil, and they would just coat their skin with it, because when you get up that high, the sun literally burns you, although it's cold, and you get blisters from even the cold, and that would protect their skin. So to get to this point in industry where they could know about certain extractions, to know about the efficacy of the plant. Remember, people, this plant was illegal all this time. So how do you jump out and have an industry where people could know so much without having what they call this whole illegal market? The so-called illegal market, which, by the way, our people suffered for very much. We're talking people of color, black and brown people suffered so much through prohibition. That is the only reason that they could have what they have here today. So that industry literally was built on the blood and backs of people of color.
And that's a very good point. I mean, people still continue, people of color and even indigenous people all over the world continue to suffer, even though criminalization, and we'll get to that further in our conversation, has decreased, still proportionately. Indigenous and African peoples around the world still continue to be incarcerated and arrested for possession crimes. I even have like a few stats that I'd like to kind of talk about. I see here that in terms of the legal market, I guess in terms of the recreational use, I guess the possession, and you correct me if I'm wrong, persons can have up to 30 grams, I believe, under the law. Anything over that, I guess that would be an infraction. However, I have stats here, even from the Toronto Star investigation in 2017. It says here that Black people with no criminal convictions were still 3 times more likely to be arrested for weed possession or marijuana possession over whites. In cities like Regina, the indigenous population makes up 9.3% of the city's population, however, makes up 41% of marijuana possession charges. So the dynamic, I don't think has changed much. However, we still have to promote advocacy around the criminalization process. We're just coming out of that, but still there are injustices. Isaiah, I want you to speak a little bit about the stigma, just platforming off of what Omari was talking about, just the stigma around ganja. I'm going to start using this word. I know it sounds horrible from my mouth.
I want to say, just before just so you know, and it's no disrespect, because these terms, how would we know? But marijuana was a term it's a derogatory term. That was basically given to ganja through the targeting of Mexican people. Basically.
There you go, because you have the J.
Yeah, so
you see
in the 30s coming up, the whole thing was about Black people, and if you watch the old film Reefer Madness, and shout out to Dana Caravan, and please go check him out, Reefer Madness TO, that's on Instagram. He's definitely doing a lot of advocacy around that, but he explains it very well in there, and how we came to where we came to the point. But marijuana, these terms, we have to, that's why we say ganja.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to start off at the top of the show. What are we going to call this? So I'm going to stick to ganja for now. And Isaiah, I want you to talk a little bit about just platform off of in terms of the stigma and just the kind of the history of that. Does it still have a stigma after legalization? And just the significance of the growing process, because you were talking about the significance of the growing process to culture and just holding our cultural history, our medicinal secrets, if you will. They were the first doctors, the first healers in different ancient civilizations. What do you think about all of that? What's your understanding?
So in terms of the stigma within the Black community, there are 3 main points that actually do have a lot to do, or have somewhat to do with kind of how we look at ganja. I'm going to make sure to say it from the rest from now on.
We're going to get used to this.
The only reason why I use the terminologies marijuana and cannabis is just because everybody is generalized to knowing that, especially my generation. But now that we have the information, we can definitely go forward and call it Ganja.
Excellent. Yeah.
So moving forward, I just want to start off by saying the Black community is probably one of the most positive advocates for, natural remedies. We prefer to get everything from the ground up. Yes, definitely. So we self-medicate in terms of, herbal remedies. You hear stories of our aunts, our grandmothers back home and how they used to remedy themselves.
My grandfather was a medicine
No
man.
Western medicines. There were no Percocets, no benzodiazepines or anything like that. No Oxycontins. There's an opiate crisis out there. So moving forward with that, I would say that, when we look at ganja and why it's such a stigma in the Black community is because it really does come with strife for us. And the strife was implemented, and the main pink elephant in the room is, we talk about criminalization. So you did list some cool facts there, and I'm just going to piggyback off of those just to let you know kind of from 10 years ago to where we are right now, we are still facing a problem. So in terms of criminalization, there was a study done also by the Toronto Star a little further using the populations of 2003 to 2013 of Black people. So it was found that we were 3 times more likely to be actually arrested for simple possession under 30 grams of ganja. This being said, when that article came out, our lovely Toronto Police Service went along and said that it was unfair to use the population as well as the percentages from the information that they gave the Toronto Star. There's something called a information inquest that you can ask from TPS and different things to gather this information. It's a freedom of inquest. Other than that, basically what their banter was back was that it's unfair to use the census population for the data that they gathered, thus getting the 3 times more than, the white community or Caucasians and things like that. And they said it was misleading. So I just want to just talk about this for a second. So when we talk about, Toronto Police Services and saying that it's misleading, if we are 3 times more likely, or we're 3 times arrested, or 3 times more arrested, or more likely to be arrested, then if the misleading from the census is basically what they're trying to say is that we do not account for ourselves properly on the census. So basically what they're saying is 2/3 of the Black population is unaccounted for in Toronto.
Wow.
So what does that mean for the stats?
What does it mean for the stats? I'm trying to say it's skewed, eh?
Yeah, so let's use there was a 2016 stat, basically talking about the population. Basically, if we put it in terms, there was about 239,000 Black people. Basically, if we were to actually times that by 3, you will get somewhere around 720,000. So basically, they're trying to say, if in lieu of 2017 or 2016, when the last census was taken, it's about 360,000 to 480,000 Black people were unaccounted for. So that's why the numbers were off. That is lunacy. Now, there was a recent shout out to Vice. Vice News is amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, I have some stats in them as well.
So they actually asked for they asked for 14 different police services from each major city, from each province and territory to give information based on race-related drug offenses dealing with cannabis simple possession. So only 6 actual provinces actually gave the information up. This is also Vice claims, allegedly. And basically, when they asked Toronto Police Services, they said that they decentralized the information on race so that they could not offer the statistics. 2 other provinces actually specifically said that they would not add the race information within the information or within the inquest. They opted out, and another said that they only count race when it comes to hate crimes. Now we all know that is.
That's how they do.
Yeah. So we all know that this is somewhat of a cover, but we know in terms of Ontario and especially Toronto Police Services, this is bad. So. I'm definitely going to leave the links out definitely on the post. But basically, I'm going to kind of shorten this up. So basically, in the 6 provinces that were given the information, all of them, Ottawa, there was a 3 times more, and this is all in 2017. Black people in Ottawa were 3 times more likely to be arrested for simple cannabis possession.
Right.
Vancouver, it's 2.5% times more. Then we have Halifax. Halifax was 3 times more. And then we have Edmonton. Edmonton was 3 times more likely. And then Calgary was 2.5 times more likely.
So basically, if we're looking at it across the board in urban centers, it's about three times more.
So now think about those populations being much smaller in Black, because our main Black populations are in Quebec and are in Ontario. So now that we talk about those main Black populations, just imagine the statistics towards Toronto Police Service, towards Toronto, towards the GTA, just talking about criminalization.
And it's only specific to this one type of crime.
Yeah.
Because we're already aware of the stats in terms of incarceration and the amount of indigenous and African peoples in the prison system proportionate to the population.
Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
there,
no worries.
But in the actual Vice News, they didn't only talk about Black people. In certain areas where there are more indigenous peoples, they were 3 to 5 times more likely to be actually prosecuted for simple possession.
In a more concentrated community.
And, definitely that. And then, you hear about there's no over-policing in Black communities, and then you wonder why, the Black community has lost somewhat of a faith in, the Toronto Police Service or police services. But not only that, in October 2018, there was, a news article out there, and the news article stated that they were going to speed up the process in terms of pardons for simple possessions, and we still not have had that, and we're almost coming to a year. So there's people who have had 2 grams of weed, 3 grams of weed, who have been convicted, who cannot get a job, who cannot find employment, who cannot pass an employment record check. Some people who were incarcerated, their life really took a turn for the worse. And, when you hear about the stories in the U.S. and, we hear certain stories, and the media does cover up certain things from us. I don't think we know all the stories, but, you hear young Black men dying, being killed by the police for just having simple grams of weed.
That's right.
So, when we talk about strife and stigma in the Black community, we have to understand that this is something that was placed upon us, and, something that we have to work through and open our eyes through and keep pushing through, but not blame the ganja, blame the systems that are around it.
The root of the problem.
And that is the root of the problem. I think another point was the Black church. I don't know if anyone wants to kind of dwell into that a little bit.
I was just going to, before you go to the Black church, I wanted to talk about, like, you were giving some great statistics, well, at least giving us the information. We don't know how accurate the statistics are. They're probably worse.
Yeah.
But we have been supporting Cannabis Amnesty out there, and Cannabis Amnesty has been doing really good work around advocating for pardons. But then they've taken it a step further and are advocating for expungement. And that's where the real struggle is right now, because, as you probably know, when you get a pardon, it's still there. Everything, all the information is still there.
Especially when you're beyond 18, right?
That's correct. So, Anna Maria Najar, she's, and also to Rina Ramprasad and a few other people that we know there, they are really advocating for expungement. And they're there at Cannabis Amnesty, and I really encourage most of us out there in the community to get involved. It's simple. Just go on cannabisamnesty.ca and basically send off, first of all, sign up, and then it's getting this to our local MPs so that they can actually lobby this and say, put through expungement. So that's one thing I want to mention. When we were at Lyft, there was a forum, and they were speaking in a discussion, and it came up that there's, I think, about 500,000, if not more, Canadians right now who currently have convictions around cannabis only.
Wow.
And so they're all facing the same situation you're talking about by not being able to find employment. And if you, I'm a person that kind of keeps up on the news and stuff like that. Probably not as good for me to do it as much, but I like to stay current on what's happening politically because it affects us so much. And Carolyn Mulrooney had said months ago, anybody who is basically outside of their system and operating outside of the system, you will not have a chance. So they're running the system in such a way where it's so oppressive. And if we don't, really tune in to what's happening, this is already running away from itself, but it can get to a point where it's going to be hard to change anything. At this point, we really need to advocate not just for change in the system, but inclusion. And hopefully,
yes,
as we are doing at Organja, we'll be launching a campaign around herbal justice, and it's all about a third tier.
Right.
That makes it accessible for all of us as indigenous peoples in our communities to create access and capacity around ganja.
That's amazing. Before we get more into it, I just want to reintroduce, if you're just tuning in, you are listening to Black Wellness, and I'm your host, Giselle Wilson. We're here talking about ganja. That is a word I'm going to stick to. If you missed the first half, you missed the history, the learning, the terminology, the cultural significance, the medicinal secrets, and now we're talking about criminalization. I am here with Brother Omari Sankofa from the Organja Society, and I'm here with Isaiah Telford, who has a business called Grab Now LLC. So he deals more with the technology side, the delivery systems, all these different types of things. And we're here having an amazing conversation, learning so much about this versatile plant. So right now we're coming out of our criminalization discussion and talking more about legalization and policy and politicians, how they're reacting to it. Why now? Why now are we bringing this from prohibition to legalization? We're laughing.
That's a loaded, because I can go off on that. I can
go off, because I want to know.
If I may start this off.
You're gonna start, and then you're gonna start. Let me just
I'm gonna give you room.
Back.
I'm gonna give you
room back.
All right, so okay, let's go back again. We have to do the history of it. So the prohibition really didn't start and kick in until around the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
In North America. And at one time, as many may know, farmers in the States, I believe, were taxed and are fined in some way for not growing what they called hemp at that time. So it hasn't been, I don't believe it were political reasons first.
Okay.
The story that's being spun, fear around what ganja could do to, white women and all of this stuff, and, all kinds of, strange and weird people doing things and going crazy and whatnot. Because the plant had been in such use for so long, and because previous to prohibition, they saw it as such a good thing, I really am skeptical of as that being the reason. It started very much to where it's ended up now. It's corporations. And if we look at historically over the past 80 years, the industries that have been behind prohibition have been big pharma, tobacco, and alcohol. So behind pharma is the medical industrial complex. And as you mentioned earlier, you were talking, Isaiah, about traditional medicines and how we have our people doing that. And that's very relevant to the discussion, because you need to convert people who traditionally use their traditional medicines to be able to use
Western
medicines, or if you can call them medicines. Medicine's supposed to cure you.
Those are
they create a problem, and then they don't give you the cure, they give you the little comebacks. You have to come back for more and more and more.
That's right.
Don't really solve the problems. We have to take time on calling it medicine, but exactly. So, and then the tobacco industry, of course, they were making the money they were making, and alcohol as well. In our cultures, it wasn't just traditional medicine and sacrament. It's very important to talk about the economic element that ganja has always played in these cultures. It has always, that the plant is spiritually connected with not only healing first and bringing people together and togetherness, but also to abundance. And these plants, if you go back into history and you talk about spirituality, they're intricate with gods, with deities. So when you're speaking about Kali, and in Jamaica, again, I refer to Jamaica because it's my culture where I come from, but they call it Kali weed or Kali. That came from literally the goddess Kali. That's how we came to call it Kali weed.
Oh, really?
Because it was the goddess Kali, Kali. So when you start doing it, and it's actually, Ganja's more attached to Shiva. When you do the history and you go to look into the history of the plant and the people again, because it's people and plant. So where we're at before we come to the part there's a whole history around how we use this plant economically as well and in abundance, and they were afraid of that. They could see societies where not only they're seeding in many cultures,
they are economically prospering.
Prospering of it.
So therefore the policy and the politics was attempt to control.
To control. That's exactly
and restrict, if anything.
That's exactly
okay.
So and that continues to this day in the very fact that we weren't just excluded or alienated out of the industry. The industry was built up in a way that we wouldn't even be able to penetrate that realm. For example, if you look at the production of cannabis, this idea of setting up $500,000 to $2 million, $3 million extraction machines. We have simple craft ways of extracting, and we know how to do it very cleanly, and it can be standardized and all of that. Why carrying it away like that? Why the monoculture of all of a sudden it was THC at one time. We wanted to see how high the THC could get. Then it's, the monoculture of how much CBD. That is a completely different concept.
Right.
Because everything is mono and segregated and compartmentalized. And now, when the industries took off, they started off with these big, huge factories to produce this plant. And greed caused that.
Definitely.
And trying to monopolize. Well, then, in maybe a year and a half in, from 2014, 2015, they started to realize, wait a second here, it doesn't really grow like that.
Correct.
If you want it to grow good, it has to grow in smaller batches. So in came microcultivation last year because they knew they weren't going to be able to compete with the so-called craft market. So these policies that we're going to get into now, they are created around keeping this monopoly on the planet.
What do you think, Isaiah?
So just piggyback off of something you said in terms of big pharma versus ganja. My own personal story with ganja is not one of personal consumption. It actually is, I have a family friend. There is a great-grandmother figure. She is 92. She is prescribed a slew of medicines, one of them being Percocets. She gets up to 30 Percocets a week. Now, just to disclose, she has an aggressive type of arthritis where she can barely move. It makes it hard for her to be mobile. She's about 4'8" and she's hunched over. It's hard for her to get out of bed. Even for her to lift her own joints on her own weight is very difficult. So you're talking about somebody who is given a prescription of Percocets, which presumably cost anywhere between $10 to $12 per pill. Street value. You mean these insurance companies are actually paying out $800 to $1,000 a month, or $200 to $300 a week just on Percocets, and then you have, she got a medical cannabis card, a CMPR card, and the shout out to Tweed. We actually accessed and used Tweed, and all my grandfather did was put it in the tea. Sorry, I called my grandfather, but he put it in her tea, and she immediately felt better. Now, she had problems with insomnia. She had problems with pain. She absolutely did not have those problems 2 to 3 days in. She stopped using the Percocets, which is amazing. Now, when you think of the value of $800 a month versus $60 a month, why is Big Pharma winning and why is Ganja losing? Now, why did Canada do it? If we look at what's been happening for the last 4 years, it's clear to tell that we're moving into a privatization, and also we're moving into an industrialist country. There are advertisements on TV right now asking companies to come to Toronto, which it does create more jobs, but when we really look at it, we're actually just making us industrialized. So, we're taking away privatization, we're taking away budgets, and we're putting it into, making Toronto look the best it can so that people come, start businesses and things of that nature, and we have a powerful economy. So basically, I think all they're doing is they're just using ganja to boost the economy. Now, when we talk about legalization and the way it was rolled out, absolute mess. And and going back to the microcultivation, they are looking for, and if you even look at the rubric of what each province is right now in terms of legalizations, not all of them are all the same. There's actually 5 different groups of legalization, and different province fit into it. So I'm just going to go down here and I'll just give you a little rundown of what that looks like. So when we talk about legalization, we have all the different provinces. So they have different legal makeups, and I'm just gonna explain this really quickly. So provinces that have privately run stores and privately operated online businesses are Manitoba, Nunavut, and Saskatchewan. Then we have privately run stores and government-operated online stores. That is Ontario, Alberta, the Northwest Territories, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Then we have government-operated stores and government-operated online sales. We have New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Quebec, and the Yukon. Only British Columbia has both privately and government-run both stores and online. So the government basically gave different provinces different legal makeups. Now, my theory is that they're going to eventually choose one that's best in terms of after they get the statistics, probably after 5 years. And then they'll choose which one is best industry-wise. Okay. We speak about, legalization, and I think the best or the poorest example of what's been going on is Ontario. Ontario has presumably the biggest population. Ontario and British Columbia got to choose because of their populations as it relates to cannabis. So that's why different cities and municipalities got to choose opt in or opt out of whether dispensaries can operate. So not only are we talking about a major accessibility problem, so, it's funny that we talk about legalization and it being easier to get, but in true terms, after legalization, ganja has been actually extremely hard to get your hands on. Much harder. And then there was actually a report on the CP24 on Wednesday that says the black market is still outweighing the legal market. Why? Because there is no accessibility. Not only is there no accessibility, the quality and the price is not properly managed, and thus the customers fail. So
by at least 35%.
By at least 35%. And I mean, let's really get into, for example, we have this lottery. So the lottery was a joke. And, I really feel for, dispensaries. Yes, they were operating illegally, but there were some dispensaries who people put their lives into, and they just wanted, honestly, to make it accessibility. And professional. Look at Cafe Downtown. There's Cannabis and Coffee. There was a whole bunch, and I've been going to them. And I still go to them. Why? Because if you compare them, it's just not comparable. Not only that, they can never get a license, as the government says. If they were ever rated, anybody that was rated before legalization happened cannot thus get a license. They're actually blacklisted. Now, then you have the lottery. So the lottery basically is 25 people pulled out of a hat who get a dispensary. I think that's a joke. So, you have people who are in the industry who could have been grandfathered in, who have the knowledge, who have the technology, who have the setup. All they had to do is basically just grandfather them in, tell them stop operating between this time and this time, do the license, you're grandfathered in, give them the process and give them the same legal ramifications that they did the new ones. Right. Now, we talk about 25 dispensaries. They're not even all open in April 2019. They're still being rolled out. I actually get the emails. So we don't, not only does Mississauga, Vaughan, Markham, just to name a few cities, cannot have dispensaries. Now we have Scarborough doesn't have a dispensary. So Scarborough, not because of them opting out, but just of the way it was rolled out. So we have dispensaries in places that are allocated unjustly and unfairly, basically. And, now a cannabis user in Pickering, in Ajax, in Scarborough, in Markham now have to travel up to, maybe 30 kilometers each way to get cannabis. And then they want to tax us for gas and say we're going to use it to conserve the earth. You know what I mean? So if we're talking about a problem, there's no accessibility to cannabis ever since legalization. It's much less.
It gets better after talking to
you. No.
Even the supply, I just want to hone in on what you're saying here. The supply, they cannot. They lied. The other day they came out and said, they think there's going to be an overproduction problem. No, they have too much supply. There's not enough. That's why they have to even depend on the black. So the so-called black market, and I have to make a little joke because for years I always heard about the black market, and then when it was kind of publicized last year, and they started exposing all of the Caucasian people doing these craft markets, all of a sudden they changed it to the gray markets. I thought that was interesting. It was black market for so much years, and all of a sudden they become the gray market. I wonder when it happened, but I want to touch on a point quickly because I know we're coming.
We're coming down to the wire, but this has been really good.
We're in a situation right now where we acknowledge the greed, we acknowledge the setup and the social apathy that's happening under this thing.
Right.
There are groups of people who have been targeted over the years, and right now I'll give you an example of why we need to have more access for indigenous peoples of color. Most in our community will say Rastafari peoples have been the people who have championed Ganja over the years and suffered for it, targeted just to having locks on their head, all of that. And we're at a point right now where last year I said, you know what, if this persists and rolls out the way they're rolling it out, not only the typical appropriation that's been happening over the years with taking the red, gold, and green and showing this Joker smoker with dreads and whatnot, and all the comical symbols and illustrations of Rastafari and Ganja. Now you're going to have people who step up and just claim it because of all of what's happening here right now. Sure enough, there's so-called churches that have popped up recently. And as far as I know, I've spoken to most of the elders in Jamaica and here, and there's no connection where they've officially said, hey, yes, Rastafari, should have their setup, their business setup and connected to the actual houses, or as we say, mansions, whether Nyabingi, whether 12 tribes of Israel, whether the Boba Shanti, or even the church. The church is not, to my knowledge, hasn't decided. I'm talking about the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, has got a clear decision on saying they're supporting or backing Ganja at this point, but there are members who are aligned with Rastafari and very much support Ganja. So we're at a point where, yes, it's been appropriated as of recently. And if you all watched CBC recently, there was a whole thing with a setup downtown and whatnot. And this is the danger. Imagine a group of people who have not only championed Ganja, but also have really promoted it through music, through reggae music, around the world. And in that same culture, that's where a lot of seeds and genetics and information on how it can be used and efficacy and all these things have happened. And yet they haven't been protected in any of this.
That's right.
And still going to be targeted. So we're really advocating for a third tier. And this third tier has to be around membership organizations, not-for-profit or for-profit, much like the model of the traditional dispensary, but a lot more holistic in its approach, be able to operate and run, and there be regulation around that. Because that allows communities
to get involved,
to be able to have autonomy, and it's so that this same great botanical resource can also benefit communities, both in their approach, in education, and abundantly as well economically. And it doesn't stop anybody from doing their corporate thing. It doesn't stop people from doing their recreational thing. But I would say that they probably are intimidated of what could happen with that, because it's the people and plant again. And I keep emphasizing that relationship, because if we lose the relationship between people and plant and have industry and corporations in the middle of it, then we lose the connection with the plant.
That's right.
We lose possible genetics that can actually create cures. And this is the problem. The healing of the nations, as Rastafari has always chanted, this plant is the healing of the nations because of all of what I've mentioned. It's the relationship between people and plant. And the majestic things that can come out of that.
Well, you mentioned the third tier, so just to clarify the tiered system and to move and kind of see what both of you are doing to resolve some of these issues through both of your platforms and businesses in this particular industry. So in Canada, in terms of legislation, from what I understand, there are two tiers currently.
That's correct.
The first one is LP, which stands for licensed producer.
That's correct.
And that's on a big scale. I guess it's a certain amount. So these are the big corporations.
Yeah, started off in the medicinal tier.
Right. So there's medicinal. So I guess companies like Canopy's,
AKA
Aurora,
corporate tier.
Corporate tier. So
Canopy,
those
Afria.
so these are some of the bigger producers. The second tier, you mentioned micro growers.
Recreational.
So that's recreational. And I guess they have a certain size requirement from what I understand.
Well, what happens is the micro cultivators still have to sell it through an LP.
Okay, so there's a partnership that has to go on.
Right. A forced partnership. It's not a voluntary partnership.
So I guess the maximum amount I think is like 2150 square feet
Something like
from what I
that.
understand.
Yes.
And I guess on that scale, they partner with the LP, I guess for purposes of distribution and processing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the third tier that you're suggesting that you're advocating for is more of a cultural community, indigenous, related to those populations to preserve their way of processing and growing.
I would like to see all Canadians. There are many people who really want to support this, and they're not necessarily Indigenous peoples. So the truth of the matter is, though I'm championing for our peoples, at the end of the day, people, period, human beings should be allowed to have that relationship between themselves and the plant. So what we're advocating for, we have a campaign launching shortly called Herbal Justice. And please, I must plug this right now.
Okay.
This coming Saturday, we have a week from now, we have an event called Ganja Justice right here in Regent Park at Pink Box Bistro. That's 555 Dundas East. We want to see you there. That's between 6 and 10. You can look us up at Organja Society on Instagram and on Facebook. And definitely you can sign up on Eventbrite. Again, that's 6 to 10 Saturday called Ganja Justice. It's all about us getting ourselves together and discussing integration, regulations, and reparations, our sovereignty, all of that right now. So we need to hear more from the community and hear more, the support, but also suggestions, because we don't know, no one person knows it all. We need to hear suggestions from people of what we're doing. So that is definitely one thing we're focusing on. We need to bring it together because we have a voice. We have things we can do. And I feel that in these times, too much of us have given up and have this idea that we have to just join the masses and do what's there. But we have to do what's right for not ourselves, but also our future generations.
That's
How
right.
is this going to play out for them? So we need to take control of this back in our hands.
Excellent. So now I just want to, for Isaiah to talk a little bit. We were talking about access to communities. So now I want you to talk about what you do and how to promote greater accessibility to Ganja and your initiatives. Yeah.
So when we talk about accessibility, I recently, in this actual podcast, we spoke about how there's a lack of accessibility in terms of just retail establishments, but not only retail establishments. Basically, only Manitoba is actually the province that retail dispensaries can actually utilize delivery services. So that means all the other provinces and territories, all 13 of them, do not offer it other than Manitoba. So, that is a great vast, or basically over 90% of the population not being able to easily access cannabis. Or Ganja.
Yeah, we're so used to
right?
it.
So,
I love that.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
No.
You taught us
y'all
something.
have been
I'm gonna train myself. Trust me. So not only do we talk about that, we speak about when we look about medical versus recreational. Medicinal or medical cannabis is still medical, or ganja is very hard for people to even get their hands on, even before legalization. So basically the makeup of that system is very this is basically how it goes. And I've actually talked to insiders in different parts of this actual I guess you could say pyramid. But there's a licensed producer, there is a doctor, and there's a cannabis clinic. So if I needed medical ganja, I would have to go to my doctor. If my doctor had the information and knew how to prescribe it and gave me the prescription, I couldn't go directly to a licensed producer. I would have to then consult a cannabis clinic. The cannabis clinic would then help me find out a choice, and then they would put me in terms or in line with a licensed producer. The licensed producer would then fulfill the prescription. So when we also talk, we have a major issue as well, and people are working on it as well, but doctors are not taught about ganja. They are not taught about ganja in medical school, and I think they're working to change that, but they're not taught. They're not taught it. So I mean, when you think of the life of a doctor, a simple practitioner who might have 200 patients, do you really think that they're going to take the time to really go through and learn that extra oomph about ganja so that they can prescribe more? It's when you think about a practitioner, they're very busy, most likely not. So going to my business, we're dealing with both recreational and medicinal, and it's called Grab Now. So Grab actually comes from a street slang in terms of any time you would go to purchase, pick up, you're grabbing. I'm going to go grab. So that's basically where the name comes from. So I thought it would resonate with a lot of the younger community as well. So that's why we kind of did that. So Grab Now is basically supposed to be both retailer and consumer friendly. And it's supposed to ground line, like at the ground going up, it's just supposed to be about accessibility. We need our retailers to be able to offer delivery. And when we talk about medicinal versus recreational is not only the euphoric smoke feeling. There is people who go to dispensaries who use it for medicinal reasons, but their doctor will not prescribe them ganja. Do you know what I mean? I know construction workers who do use sativas for pain management and go to work and are energetic and they're fine. They use it for pain management. They use it to help their bodies. I know people who have trouble sleeping who use indica. People who, have been prescribed different Western medicines, for their, I forget the word, but basically because they can't sleep, they use a simple indica, they can go to sleep. So when we speak about accessibility, there's no accessibility. You have these long lines. The first day the dispensary opened, the first dispensary, there was a 3-hour wait just for ganja. Could you imagine a 3-hour wait? Could you imagine you have to, if you're in a city that you cannot have a dispensary, you have to travel to a downtown core area, park, pay for parking, walk, wait in line,
and wait in line, prices.
Go inside. You could be looking for a specific strain. You could be looking for a specific type. You're not going to get it most likely. There's a shortage. So, there's a shortage. So you might not even get it when you get there. And when you get there, you have to dibble and dabble. You pick up something and then you're charged $16 to $18 for 1 gram. Then you have to make the trip home. Now we talk about exuberant gas prices. So we have gas prices, parking, your time. And then we talk about legalization is about making Canadians have access. So, Grab Now, our technology is built. I'm so happy to announce that.
Congratulations.
But we are also rolling out a petition called the POT petition, Provinces offering transportation. Our website will actually detail based on your address, which MP and which licensing body that you can email to about the limitations towards accessibility through the non-allowing of delivery to dispensaries.
Right.
So, the POT petition will be up soon, and it will be for all the different minus Manitoba, all the different provinces as well as territories. And, we're going to go with the global campaign, and I hope that everybody goes out and supports it. Now, we will be launching our website towards the end of August.
Okay.
So the website will detail everything our app does in terms of the features. There's very cool features there. And I've surveyed the actual industry in terms of the other cannabis delivery systems, and we blow them out the water. So I'm definitely confident that Grab Now is going to be the focal point of cannabis delivery. I'm completely certain with the technology that we have. But not only that, we need to make ganja accessible to those around us. We need to make it more accessible. There's so much rules and regulations, and the government always puts rules and regulations on us. But even with legalization, we think that it was being opened up when it was really being taken away. So, you talk about the black market and why it's prospering. If you took out accessibility, they wouldn't really have so much of that issue, right? Because, you have the dealer who will come to your home or who lives near you, who is accessible, and then you have the dispensary that is 25 kilometers away that you have to go to and waste your time and then pay exuberant prices. So that is Grab Now.
So I was just going to say, this is awesome. I'd love to see possibly some sort of collab with things like with entities like Cannabis Amnesty, like how you have a campaign already. That's another way that, using an app like yours would be a great way to get that.
Once our app is created, I have so much it's just hard to describe. I can't really divulge because I'm going to be honest. Grab Now is somebody has already infringed on my trademark once before, already before we even launched. So this just lets me know that, I'm in the right
area.
I'm in the right lane. I'm in the right area. I'm the underdog. I'm the underdog trying to come up, and and even as the underdog, people are still trying to covet from me. So with that being said,
Excellent.
I'm telling you, that's why it's like I do plan to cross promote so many ganja-related, community. Forgot the word for it, but basically initiatives and activities and networks, because we have access to the number one thing, and that is phones. We are installed in phones. So, the way we plan to really roll this out and really give back to the ganja community and, really build ourselves up. I want to be, a black billionaire, and I want this to be my billionaire idea, my billionaire.
I think it will be.
It will be. It is.
Right? And when we look about how we're not regularly represented properly in the industries, I have done my research, but I'm not going to really speak from fact. But we are going to say there are basically almost no black licensed producers who are at the top of the chain. There's
very
a few,
small portion.
But
let's just say
when you think of the bigger companies, and it's funny, you see the bigger companies, they go out to the Caribbean islands, and this is something, you have the Caribbean islands, and this is amazing. They are decriminalizing ganja, and I think it's amazing for them for the economy if they are able to export and import. I think it would be amazing. You have Jamaica. My cousin is a master grower. He kind of taught me more about ganja on the back end, but he was also connected to somebody in one of the major licensed producers. But it just goes to show you that they are out there scouting our lands. They're out there in the Caribbean.
Trying to get the seed.
They're out there. They're out there scouting our lands for their Caribbean, for their Caribbean farms. Meanwhile, there's people in the Caribbean
underselling them, undercutting.
Listen, if you go on a site, there's loads of information. All of it. That's what we're about. Organja.org. I want you to go on, inform yourself. We've got a lot of information of what was happening in Jamaica up to now. With them scouring through, trying to give people there $1 a gram, companies there. So raping and robbing and rip and run off. There's a lot going on politically. Inform yourselves. Stay in touch. Please come out to our event, Bridging the Gap series. This Saturday, I said, Bridging the Gap series, our number 9. We've been doing this for almost a year. Come out. And hopefully Isaiah will be there.
Oh, he will be there. That's it. Yeah.
Shout out to Lori Beezer.
Yeah.
Big up, sis.
Tell them where they can find you, Isaiah.
So I just want to say that I learned so much from you today. And, I am also new in this industry.
Likewise,
I am new in this industry. I've been in the entrepreneur realm for a really long time. I've taught it, even to inner city youth. However, I just want to say the history behind it is very good to know, because how do you know where you're going in the future if you don't know your past?
If you don't know where you're coming from.
If you don't know where your past is, if you don't know where you're coming from, if you don't know what you're selling, if you don't know why you're doing it, why are you doing it?
Get informed.
Get informed.
How can they get in contact
you can reach
with you?
me, Isaiah, at sales@grabnow.co. So that's sales@grabnow.co. That is my email, my professional business email. You can also reach me at Isaiah@grabnow.co. We're basically doing things through email right now. Our website will be up, like I said, towards the end of September, and we're going to be launching a few campaigns throughout the month. I'm actually going to be in the U.S., actually in August, actually in California doing some research as well, because we do plan to be a North American company, not only a Canadian company.
That's awesome.
Also,
Wonderful.
2 states have recently, I can't remember the names, but 2 states have actually just allowed legalization. So it went from 9 to 11 states that now have recreational cannabis in the Americas. That's 1/4 of the country. And maybe with the political climate that they're in, it will be legalized completely throughout the United States, and then that's a market that's 11 times bigger. So that's what I plan, or that's kind of what we're looking at.
That's awesome.
Well, congratulations to the both of you. I'm so sorry. I think we're going to have a part 2
You definitely have
to this
We've
discussion.
gone well over time.
Wait, I know we've gone
Well
well,
over
and I
time.
allowed it just because I know that our listeners and our viewers really want this information. And no, this is just an introductory, so we'll definitely invite you on. And if you have any suggestions for other members to come on and talk, we encourage you to collaborate. We encourage people to contact, reach out.
Come on, June 29th, Bridging the Gap series, next Saturday right here at Regent Park,
Exactly.
June 29th. It's in the evening, 6 to 10 p.m.
6
and
to
Box has amazing food also.
there you go. I'll up your eye top food and 289-432-1222 is the number you can get a hold of Organja Society. We're rolling out membership soon. Stay tuned.
Excellent. And if you want to reach out to Black Wellness, please email us at blackwellnessworldwide@gmail.com. That's blackwellnessworldwide@gmail.com. You can catch each and every episode if you can't catch us on radioregent.com. That's where our
Black
live
Wellness
podcast
is the ish. That's Love
Thank
it.
you so
Love
much.
it.
Just listen to our podcast on radioregent.com, and we do our live video. We do our video broadcast the week after on Facebook. So you can always catch our episodes, information. We will leave information both about Isaiah's and Omari's businesses and organizations. So we'll leave the links and all the information so you can contact them.
Some cool articles.
Exactly. At Support Black Wellness Now. So at Support Black Wellness Now, please
Black
continue to
Wellness.
watch and support us. We're going to be featured at the Durham Caribbean Festival, which will be June 29th, but during the day. So from 10 to 5,
That's a
please
good
come out.
day. That's a good
It's
day.
a high day. So please come out and see our collection of vendors at the Durham Caribbean Festival next week, June 29th at the Pickering High School.
Ganja Justice.
There you go. So thank you so much. Peace out from Black Wellness. I've been your host, Giselle Wilson. Thank you.
Bless up. Bless up.
Yes.